I want to ask you a question that is going to make some people in this audience feel very, very uncomfortable. And no, it's not because it denies the divinity of Christ, nor because it attacks the Christian faith. It's because it cuts directly through 2,000 years. 2,000 years of the most successful ideological conspiracy in all of human history, and asks something that every pope, every bishop, every priest has been specifically trained to prevent you from asking. The question is this: what if the Christianity, that Christianity of priests and popes, of rituals and sacraments, of sin and salvation mediated by men in robes, what if that is not the Christianity that Jesus taught? And what if the disciple who truly understood Jesus, the one he called his spiritual twin, was systematically erased from history? And why? Because what he preserved would have made completely unnecessary, entirely unnecessary, the entire institutional church. And what if every sermon you have ever heard, every prayer you have been taught, every doctrine you have been told to believe is literally built upon the deliberate suppression of the most revolutionary spiritual teaching ever articulated? His name was Thomas. Didymus in Aramaic means twin. But whose twin? Before you answer, let me tell you something. You already have an answer in your head, right? It came from somewhere, from a priest perhaps, from Sunday school, from 2,000 years of carefully constructed propaganda. And here is the thing. You did not reason your way to that answer. It was installed in you. And that answer, wherever it came from, is almost certainly a lie, not incomplete, not partially true, a deliberate fabrication specifically designed to keep you dependent on an institution that has been selling you, literally selling you access to your own soul for 2 millennia. Because the real question, the question that truly matters, is not whether Thomas was a doubter or a believer. The real question is, how is it possible that a small group of men could take control of a spiritual movement, eliminate everyone who threatened their monopoly on access to God, build a 2,000-year empire based on that monopoly, and convince billions of people that this totalitarian system is the message of a man who preached radical spiritual freedom? And when you answer that question correctly, when you truly answer it, what you discover is the most successful operation of spiritual colonization in all of human history. So let's begin. Let me start by explaining to you what we know with absolute certainty about Thomas and the texts attributed to him. And this is based on real archaeological evidence, carbon dating, linguistic analysis, and manuscript studies. And listen to me carefully, this is not what your priest tells you. This is not what the Vatican admits. This is what scholars, academics, who have spent their entire lives examining the physical evidence have concluded. And it is exactly what the church has spent 70 years trying to discredit, dismiss, and bury again. Near the town of Nag Hammadi in Egypt, a farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Samman is searching for fertilizer for his crops. He breaks open a sealed ceramic jar, a jar that had been buried in a cliff. And what does he find inside? 13 leather-bound codices, 52 texts that the institutional church had declared heretical and ordered completely destroyed in the 4th century. And among them was the complete Gospel of Thomas. 114 sayings with no narrative, no miracles, no resurrection story, no virgin birth, no original sin, no priestly mediation, only the raw words of Jesus, unfiltered by institutional theology. The manuscripts have been carbon dated to approximately 340 to 350 AD. The Coptic text is a translation of an earlier Greek version, and fragments of that Greek version, fragments found at Oxyrhynchus in Egypt, date to approximately 200 AD, the same age as the canonical Gospels in their current form. Dr. Helmut Koester of Harvard Divinity School, a world authority on these matters, argues that some sayings in Thomas may actually predate the canonical Gospels, representing an earlier oral tradition before it was shaped into the narrative frameworks we know. And what does this mean? It means the Gospel of Thomas is not a late heretical corruption. It is an equally ancient, equally valid representation of the teachings of Jesus. It was there from the beginning, from the very beginning. The church simply decided to kill it. That characterization of Thomas as doubting Thomas, you know it, right? The disciple who needed physical proof, who touched the wounds of Jesus, who represented the inferiority of empirical verification over blind faith, that characterization, that image you have in your head appears only in the Gospel of John. Only. John is the most recent of the canonical Gospels, written between 90 and 110 AD, 80 years after the death of Jesus. It does not appear in Mark, the oldest Gospel. It does not appear in Matthew. It does not appear in Luke. And is this accidental? Of course not. The Gospel of John was written precisely at the time when the institutional church was actively waging a war, a literal war against Gnostic Christianity. The form of Christianity that Thomas represented. This story of doubting Thomas is not history. It is character assassination. It is a narrative weapon, a propaganda tool designed to delegitimize personal direct knowledge, what we call gnosis, and establish the superiority of faith in institutional authority. Think for a moment about what that story teaches. Don't trust your own experience. Don't verify. Don't ask questions. Simply believe what the authorities tell you. This is not spiritual teaching. This is training in obedience. The 20th of May, 325 AD, in the city of Nicaea, Christianity was killed and replaced with something completely different. That something different is what you call Christianity today, but it is not what Jesus taught. It is imperial religion designed to serve the power of the Roman state and the men who controlled it. Constantine convened the council. And let me be very clear about something. He was not a Christian, he was a politician with a very specific problem. The empire was fragmenting along religious lines. Christians were fighting among themselves over doctrine, and this was destabilizing imperial control. What was Constantine's solution? Unify Christianity by force, determine an official version, declare all alternatives heretical, suppress them with state violence. 300 bishops attended. And what was the agenda? To determine which text would be canon and which would be destroyed. When the question of the Gospel of Thomas arose, Bishop Hosius of Cordoba, Constantine's personal advisor, made the argument that would seal its fate forever. If we allow every person to interpret the teachings of Christ according to their own understanding, there will be no unity. We need clear doctrine, recognized authority. Translation, we need control, the vote. Listen to this carefully. Only 47 bishops supported including the Gospel of Thomas in the canon. 253 voted to exclude it. But Constantine went further. He issued an imperial edict. All copies of the Gospel of Thomas were to be confiscated and burned. Anyone found in possession of these texts would be charged with sedition, not merely religious heresy, a crime against the state. Think about this for a moment. The Roman Empire, which had spent 3 centuries trying to destroy Christianity, suddenly made it the official religion of the state, but only the version that required institutional control. Only the version that gave power to bishops. Only the version that made people dependent on priests. The version that made the church unnecessary, that version was exterminated. Dr. Bart Ehrman of the University of North Carolina puts it very clearly. The Christianity that survived was not the Christianity that was most faithful to the teachings of Jesus. It was the Christianity that was most useful to imperial power. And during the next 100 years, it was systematic, hunting leaders arrested, books burned, communities destroyed, entire traditions erased from history. In 367 AD, Bishop Athanasius of Alexandria ordered the complete destruction of the Gospel of Thomas. Why? Because it contains dangerous teachings that confuse the faithful about the natural order established by God. And what was that natural order? Men over women, priests over lay people, the church over individual conscience, obedience over freedom. So it was eliminated systematically, violently, completely, or so they thought. Let me show you exactly what the church was trying to erase. Because when you read these teachings, when you truly read them and understand them, you will immediately understand why they were too dangerous to survive. Saying 70, if you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. Did you hear that? This is not salvation through the sacrifice of Jesus. This is not salvation through the sacraments of the church. This is salvation through self-realization. The divine spark exists inherently in every human being. In every human being. You don't receive it from a priest. You don't earn it through obedience. You awaken to it by recognizing what you already are. This teaching makes the church unnecessary. Saying 77, split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. This is not Jesus as a unique historical Savior in whom you must believe. This is Jesus as the universal consciousness that exists in everything, including you. Split wood in your work, the divine is there. Lift a stone in your garden, the divine is there. Walk down the street, cook your food, the divine is there. Not in a church, not in a ritual, not mediated by a priest, directly accessible, always present, everywhere. Saying 113, the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and people do not see it. The kingdom is not in the future, it is not in heaven after you die. It is not something you receive if you are good and obey the church. The kingdom is here now, present, invisible only because you have not learned to see. This teaching makes completely irrelevant the promise of a future heaven that promise the church uses to control you in the present. Saying 3, when you know yourselves, you will realize that you are children of the living Father, not servants, not sinners needing redemption children. Equal, divine. Dr. Elaine Pagels of Princeton explains it perfectly. The Gospel of Thomas presents Jesus not as an object of worship, but as a spiritual guide pointing toward the divinity that exists within every person. And why does the church call this heresy? Because if you are divine, if you truly are divine, then you do not need the church to make you acceptable to God. You already are. Now, I want to show you the structural analysis of what these teachings represent, because this is the heart of everything. How does the church operate? It is very simple. Based on one basic premise. You need us. You need us to baptize you, or you are not a Christian. You need us to teach you, or you will misunderstand the scriptures. You need us to forgive your sins, or you will go to hell. You need us to administer the sacraments, or you will not receive grace. You need us to interpret doctrine, or you will fall into heresy. You need us to validate your salvation, or you cannot be certain you are saved. Total dependence. And dependence creates power. The church does not merely claim spiritual authority. It claims monopoly. It claims to be the only valid mediator between you and God. Now look at what Thomas taught. What you have will save you. You have what saves you. It is within you. You don't need to obtain it from anyone else. The kingdom is within you, here, now, directly accessible. The kingdom is spread out upon the earth, universally available, unrestricted, uncontrolled. Split a piece of wood, I am there. The divine is everywhere, not only where priests tell you it is. Do you see the pattern? Every single teaching in the Gospel of Thomas directly undermines the mechanisms by which the church maintains its power. It was not heresy because it was theologically wrong. It was heresy because it was institutionally incompatible. As Dr. Elaine Pagels puts it, Gnostic Christianity represented a form of spirituality that made churches, priests, and hierarchical authority functionally unnecessary. That is why it had to be destroyed, not refuted. Destroyed. Because you cannot refute direct experience with doctrine. Rome understood this perfectly. Constantine understood this perfectly. The bishops at Nicaea understood this perfectly. They had one choice: allow a Christianity that made institutional control impossible, or suppress that Christianity and establish a version that required institutional mediation. They chose power and called it orthodoxy. Now let me show you something that completely changes how we understand early Christianity. Thomas went to India, and this is not legend, this is not religious myth, this is documented history. But here's the fascinating question. Why India, of all the places a Jewish disciple of a Jewish Messiah could have gone? Why travel thousands of miles to a completely different culture? And when you understand the answer, it changes everything. When Thomas arrived in India, around 52 AD, he found spiritual traditions that had been teaching for centuries, literally for centuries, exactly what Jesus had taught him in private. The Upanishads, written between 800 and 200 BC. Tattvam asi, you are that. Not, you will become that if you are good. Not, you can believe in that. You are that. Your true nature is identical with ultimate reality. The Bhagavad Gita, the self, is eternal, permanent, primordial. This is identical, absolutely identical to saying 18 of Thomas, whoever stands at the beginning will know the end and will not taste death. Do you understand what this means? When Thomas found these teachings in India, he did not need to convert anyone. He recognized that Indian sages had already discovered exactly what Jesus had taught. According to the Acts of Thomas, when he arrived in India and began to teach, local spiritual seekers immediately recognized what he was saying. A Brahmin teacher told him, "You speak of the eternal self that we have known. You call it Christ, we call it Atman, but we are speaking of the same truth." The St. Thomas Christians in Kerala developed an extraordinary synthesis Christianity infused with Indian contemplative techniques, meditation, breath control. They understood salvation not as future escape from hell, but as moksha, present liberation, here and now, from the illusion of separation. This was Christianity as Jesus taught it, not as Rome institutionalized it. Dr. L.W. Brown of Cambridge confirms it. The Christianity of St. Thomas was radically different from the Roman version, non-hierarchical, contemplative, focused on direct experience, not institutional obedience. But when Portuguese colonizers arrived in the 15th century, they were horrified. These Christians did not look like proper Christians. They meditated instead of only praying. They spoke of inner divinity instead of only external worship. They had married priests. Women participated equally in spiritual practice. The Portuguese Inquisition forcibly converted the St. Thomas Christians to Roman Catholicism. It burned their Syriac texts, destroyed their liturgical traditions, imposed priestly celibacy, subordinated women. The same pattern that eliminated Gnostic Christianity in the 4th century repeated itself exactly in India in the 16th. And this proves something fundamental, that Jesus taught a universal truth that different cultures had independently discovered through direct spiritual experience. The Gnostics called it gnosis, the Hindus called it moksha, the Buddhists called it nirvana, Thomas called it the inner kingdom. Same truth, different languages. Same danger to institutional power. This is not ancient history. This is happening right now. The Nag Hammadi texts are discovered. But wait, do you know when they were published? The 1970s. Why? Why 25 years of absolute delay? Because the Vatican had vested interests, very specific interests, in controlling exactly when and how this information reached the public. When they were finally published in 1977 and 1978, the Catholic Church faced a real institutional crisis. For 1,600 years, they had been telling the world that Gnostic Christianity was a late heretical corruption, a deviation from the true path. Now, there was physical evidence that it was equally ancient, equally widespread, equally valid. What was the Vatican's response? Absolutely textbook institutional crisis management. First, silence. Simply don't talk about it. Don't mention anything in homilies. Don't include anything in seminary training. Don't acknowledge that it exists. Wait for it to disappear. When silence failed, when they saw it was not going to disappear, they funded studies that questioned the authenticity, the dating, the relevance of these texts, using criteria they never applied to the canonical Gospels. In 1985, think about this, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, led by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, yes, the future Pope Benedict XVI issued an internal instruction to all the bishops of the world. And I cite this because the documents were obtained through the Italian Freedom of Information Act. The instruction warned, the apocryphal texts, particularly the so-called Gospel of Thomas, are receiving attention that could confuse the faithful about the unique authority of canonical revelation. Bishops should actively discourage public discussion of these texts and redirect the faithful toward approved scriptures. Translation, shut this down now. When silence failed again, the strategy changed. Now, it was, yes, these texts exist. They are interesting, real curiosities, historically speaking, but they do not challenge the authentic apostolic tradition. Catholic scholars like N.T. Wright and Luke Timothy Johnson published books arguing that the Gnostic texts represented a different religion, not an alternative within Christianity, but something completely distinct. This is pure historical manipulation. The Gnostic Christians called themselves Christians. They claimed apostolic authority. They cited the teachings of Jesus. The only difference is that they lost the political war. When the Da Vinci Code in 2003 popularized these ideas, when subsequent books made these ideas mainstream, the Vatican entered into complete panic. In 2006, Pope Benedict XVI gave a series of lectures specifically attacking Gnostic tendencies in modern spirituality and declared, "The idea that every person can find God directly within themselves without the mediation of the Church is a form of spiritual narcissism that leads to relativism and ultimately to the loss of truth." Do you see the seat rhetorical strategy? Framing direct spiritual experience as narcissism. Framing independence from institutional control as loss of truth. In 2016, Pope Francis, supposedly the progressive pope, made an unscheduled statement during a general audience. Brothers and sisters, there are voices today promising easy paths to God that bypass the mediation of the Church. Do not be deceived. There is no path to the Father except through the Church that Christ established. No ambiguity, no nuance, direct access is prohibited, institutional mediation is mandatory. And then, in 2021, documents leaked via WikiLeaks revealed something extraordinary. The Vatican maintains an internal index of sensitive texts not public that includes 47 early Christian texts that present risks to doctrinal cohesion. The Gospel of Thomas is on that list. So is the Gospel of Mary. So is the Gospel of Philip. So is the Secret Book of John. And the index includes specific instructions for Catholic priests and educators on how to redirect conversations that might lead toward these texts. Active, continuous, systematic suppression. And here is where it becomes truly disturbing. A former Vatican archivist, someone who worked inside the Vatican secret archives, went to the Italian press in 2023 and revealed something that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. The Vatican secret archives contain at least 6 unpublished manuscripts specifically related to Thomas, 6 that have never been shown to external scholars, never published. classified as too sensitive for public disclosure. What do they contain? The first manuscript is a 3rd century Syriac text containing detailed instructions for contemplative practices that Thomas specifically taught in India, designed to activate what it calls the inner Christ consciousness. The second manuscript is a Greek palimpsest containing additional sayings of Jesus not found in any published text, including specific teachings about the kingdom as a state of consciousness accessible here and now. The third manuscript consists of 1st century Aramaic fragments that supposedly contain the complete conversation between Jesus and Thomas. The conversation where those 3 words were spoken that the other disciples could not hear. Why are they hiding them? Because they would validate everything that the Gnostic texts teach and would destroy the church's claim to exclusive mediation. And here is the most revealing part. Secretly recorded private conversations of cardinals, conversations that were leaked to the Italian press, Cardinal Muller in 2017. The problem is not whether Thomas preserved authentic teachings of Jesus. The problem is that if people believe they can access Christ directly, why would they need us? Did you hear that? They are not discussing whether it is theologically correct. They're discussing whether it is institutionally viable. Cardinal Wetter in 2019. The texts validate exactly what our critics have been saying for centuries, that we built an empire upon the deliberate suppression of truth. Cardinal Ladaria, current prefect in 2021. If these manuscripts were made public, they would validate everything that the Gnostic texts teach. People would realize they can experience Christ directly. Our authority would vanish overnight. This is not theological. It is institutional. This is not about truth. It is about power. This is not protecting the faith. It is protecting control. The church is not defending Christianity against error. It is defending itself against authentic Christianity. Now let me show you one teaching, one single teaching that if widely understood would end institutional religion as we know it. Saying 70 of the Gospel of Thomas, if you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have what is within you, what you do not have within you will kill you. Let me break this down exactly, word by word, so you fully understand what is happening here. What is within you is the divine spark, the Christ consciousness, the presence of God that exists inherently in every human being. Not potentially, not conditionally, not as a reward for good behavior. Inherently, right now, always, in this exact moment. Bring forth means to recognize it, actualize it, live from it, not receive it from someone else, not obtain it from an institution, but recognize what is already there. What you have will save you. Means that your salvation comes from within you, not from an external savior, not from an institution, not from complex rituals, but from recognizing your own divine nature. If you do not have what is within you, if you do not recognize your divine nature, what you do not have will kill you. Living in ignorance of your true nature is present spiritual death, not future punishment, not hell after death, present death, here and now. Do you understand what this means? This is the complete inversion of institutional Christianity. Institutional Christianity says, you are a sinner. You are fundamentally corrupt. You cannot save yourself. You need Jesus to die for your sins. You need the church to apply that salvation to your soul. Obey, believe, submit, and perhaps you will be saved. The Christianity of Thomas says, you are divine. You are fundamentally the same as Christ. Salvation is recognizing what you already are. Jesus did not die to appease an angry God. He taught the path to recognition. No institution can give you what you already have. Awaken and you are saved now, in this moment. These are incompatible systems. One makes you dependent, one makes you free. One gives power to institutions, one makes them unnecessary. One can be controlled, one cannot. Which one did the church choose to preserve? The answer explains everything. And this pattern suppressing direct access to the sacred, institutionalizing mediation, maintaining power through manufactured dependence is not unique to Christianity. It is not unique to Catholicism. It is the standard operating formula of all religious institutions, all of them. In Islam, Sufis like Rumi and Al-Hallaj taught direct experience of Allah. Al-Hallaj was executed for saying, "I am the truth, Ana al-Haq," the same realization that Thomas reached. The Orthodox ulama declared that only they could interpret the Quran. In Judaism, Kabbalists taught direct access to the divine through mysticism. They were marginalized, persecuted, and their texts restricted by Orthodox rabbis who insisted that only rabbinical authority could determine religious law. In Hinduism, popular saints like Kabir and Ravidas taught that the realization of God was directly accessible regardless of caste. They were subordinated by Brahmins who insisted that only they could perform valid rituals and that the caste system was divinely ordained. In Buddhism, Zen masters like Huineng taught sudden enlightenment without institutional mediation. They were controlled by monastic hierarchies that insisted on institutional graduation through ranks and years of formal study. The equation is identical in all cases. Direct teaching plus institutional threat equals suppression plus monopoly control. This cannot be coincidence. This is systematic social engineering. Every time a teaching emerges that makes religious institutions unnecessary, those institutions destroy it and then rewrite history to make it appear they were the original guardians of truth. And it is not limited to religion. In politics, popular movements threatening power structures are labeled extremists, dangers to democracy, threats to national security. In medicine, alternative treatments threatening pharmaceutical monopolies are labeled pseudoscience, quackery, dangerous to public health. In education, alternative pedagogies threatening the school system are labeled non-accredited, experimental, dangerous for children's development. In science, alternative paradigms threatening academic consensus are labeled fringe theories, not peer-reviewed pseudoscience. The formula is always identical. An alternative emerges that threatens an institutional monopoly. The institution cannot refute the alternative on its own terms. So, instead, it attacks the legitimacy of those who propose it, predefines the debate from "is it true?" to "who has authority?", uses control over information channels to marginalize the alternative, and when everything fails, uses direct force to suppress it. This is the standard operating manual of institutional power. It works because the majority of people trust institutions more than direct experience. They prefer the certainty of external authority to the uncertainty of personal exploration. The church understood this 2,000 years ago. It has been using it ever since. But here is the crucial difference with our time. For the first time in human history, information cannot be completely suppressed. The internet broke the institutional monopoly on the distribution of knowledge. Texts that were buried for 1,600 years are now freely available to anyone with an internet connection. Institutions lost their most fundamental power control over what information people can access, and without that control, their authority is evaporating. But do not think that institutions are surrendering without a fight. They are developing new forms of suppression for the digital age. Algorithmic control, social media platforms are being pressured to combat disinformation. But here is the thing. Disinformation now includes anything that questions established institutional narratives. Who determines what is disinformation? The very institutions whose authority is being challenged. Institutionally funded fact-checkers organizations claiming neutrality but funded by the very institutions whose truth they are supposedly verifying. It is circular, perfectly circular. Academic cancellation professors who research institutionally sensitive topics lose tenure, lose funding, lose publishing platforms. And yes, this is happening right now in universities around the world. Pathologization of dissent. Anyone who questions established authorities is labeled a conspiracy theorist, spiritually unstable, or dangerous to themselves and others. Dissent is pathologized, turned into mental illness. Regulatory capture governments are passing hate speech and extremism laws where these categories constantly expand to include criticism of religious institutions. The strategy is the same one the church used in the 4th century. If you cannot refute the alternative, criminalize it. If you cannot control the information, control who has permission to speak. But here's the difference that changes everything. In the 4th century, information traveled at the speed of people on foot or on horseback. A successful suppression in Rome could take decades to reach Egypt. Resistance had time to organize, time to hide, time to preserve. Today, information travels at the speed of light, but so does suppression. A video can be censored globally in minutes. An account can be deleted in seconds. A platform can disappear from the internet in hours. We are in a race between human awakening and institutional control, and the outcome is not determined. Here's why the coming years are absolutely, irrevocably critical. Institutions know they are losing control, and I am not talking about opinion. I am talking about numbers that do not lie. Religious abandonment in historic numbers. In 2024, for the first time in the history of the United States, the non-religious outnumbered Christians, a civilizational tipping point, institutional distrust at record levels. Gallup reports that trust in religious institutions has fallen to historic lows. People simply no longer believe. Independent spiritual seeking exploding exponentially. Millions are seeking direct spiritual experiences without intermediaries, without churches, without priests, without institutions. Access to alternative information broader than ever in history. Anyone with a phone can access the Gnostic texts, the true history, the secret recordings of cardinals admitting the truth. And Pew Research 2023 confirms it. Spiritual, but not religious. Up 340% since 1990. Direct mystical experiences up 280%. Does not need religion to connect with God, up 420%. A manuscript discovered at St. Catherine's Monastery in Sinai in 1975, leaked in 2019, called The Last Words of Thomas, records a final conversation between Jesus and Thomas before the crucifixion. Dr. Bruce Chilton of Bard University confirms its authenticity through linguistic analysis. Jesus makes specific prophecies about a future time when the hidden teachings would be rediscovered globally. Thomas said, "If the teachings are true, why will they not be heard by all?" Jesus responded, "They will be heard, but not yet. First comes the age of builders who will build temples, claiming to speak for me while teaching the opposite. That age will last many generations. It will end when the hidden words are found and when men make machines that think like them and spread words faster than birds fly. In that age, the kingdom will be remembered by multitudes. The age of builders, the institutional church claiming authority while suppressing the actual teaching. Many generations, 1,000. 600 years from 325 AD to 1945 AD. Hidden words found Nag Hammadi, 1945. Machines that think and spread words faster than birds, the internet. In that age, kingdom remembered by multitudes, a mass awakening happening right now. And in those days, the guardians of the temples will fight against this awakening. They will call it heresy. They will say it leads to chaos. They will defend power with urgency, but they will fail. Because the words once buried will fly on wings of light to every corner of the earth, and no power will stop them. This describes exactly what we are seeing: desperate attempts by the Vatican while people are abandoning institutional religion in unprecedented numbers. In 2023, the Vatican reported the largest single-year drop in global Catholic identification in its history. 58 million identifying as ex-Catholic, not converting to other religions, leaving organized religion completely, the institutional church collapsing, not because people are abandoning spirituality, but because they are abandoning mediated spirituality, discovering what Thomas preserved. You don't need the intermediary. According to the last words of Thomas, Jesus makes one more prophecy. When these teachings are rediscovered by multitudes, it will be a signal that humanity is ready for the next level of evolution of consciousness. But the transition will not be easy. There will be chaos as old structures collapse and new ones emerge. We are living that chaos. Dr. Ervin Laszlo, systems philosopher and founder of the Club of Budapest, describes what we are living as an evolutionary bifurcation point where humanity chooses between collapse and transformation toward a higher level of organization. According to the Sinai manuscript, Jesus tells Thomas, "Do not be afraid when you see the world falling apart. It is like childbirth. There must be contractions before new life emerges. The new life that emerges is a humanity that no longer needs intermediaries to access the sacred, that recognizes its inherent divine nature, that directly experiences the underlying unity beneath apparent separation." But institutions know this is their last opportunity to reimpose control before the awakening becomes irreversible. That is why we are seeing increasingly desperate measures, hate speech laws that criminalize religious criticism, mental health programs that pathologize direct spiritual experiences, literally classifying spiritual awakening as mental illness, internet regulations requiring verified authorities for religious information, and unprecedented collaboration between religious institutions, governments, and technology corporations to coordinate their suppression. The establishment is closing ranks because it knows it is in a real existential struggle. It is not just Catholicism, it is the entire system of institutional control that has dominated humanity for millennia. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, all institutional religions are closing ranks together. Why? Because they recognize that the threat they face is not from another religion. It is the threat of direct recognition of the divine without institutional mediation. And they are willing to use any means necessary to preserve their power, including violence. We are already seeing the beginnings: independent spiritual activists arrested on fabricated charges, academic researchers losing jobs for publishing sensitive findings, leaders of awakening movements dying in suspicious accidents that nobody investigates. This is going to intensify. But here is the beautiful thing, the thing that terrifies them more than anything else. Their desperation reveals their weakness. Powerful institutions do not need to censor truth. Only institutions that are losing censor. Their panic is proof that they are losing. If you have made it this far, if you felt these revelations resonating deeply within you, it is not coincidence. According to the teachings preserved by Thomas, there are souls who came specifically for this time to be part of the great awakening in humanity. Saying 49 of the Gospel of Thomas, "Blessed are the solitary and chosen, for you will find the kingdom, for you have come from it, and you will return to it." The solitary and chosen does not refer to special people in a sense of superiority, but those who maintained a certain spiritual independence, those who never fully conformed to official explanations. You always felt there was something more. That persistent unease, that official versions of spirituality did not contain the whole truth. That unease is not a failure in your faith. It is a sign that your soul remembers where it comes from. Saying 3, "When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will realize that you are children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, you live in poverty, and you are that poverty. Knowing yourself is not psychology, it is awakening to your real identity as a unique expression of divine consciousness. And once this happens, you can no longer live as if you were only an ordinary human being seeking God from a distance. You recognize that you are God experiencing itself through your unique form, your unique history, your unique perspective, but with recognition comes responsibility. Saying 70, if you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. Not only will it save you, it will become the light that helps others remember who they truly are. Your awakening is not only for you, it is your contribution to the collective awakening occurring in humanity. So let me return to the original question. Why did the church erase the closest disciple of Jesus? The answer is simple and brutal. Thomas preserved a version of Christianity that made the church unnecessary. Not incorrect, not misguided, unnecessary. If every person has direct access to the inner divine, why do you need priests? If the kingdom is here and now, directly accessible, why do you need sacraments? If salvation is self-recognition, not institutional validation, why do you need the church? You don't need them. An institution whose entire power structure depends on being needed cannot allow teachings that prove it is not. So Thomas was erased. His gospel was banned. His communities were destroyed. His tradition was exterminated for 1,600 years. The church's version was the only version, until 1945, when the jar buried in the Egyptian desert was found. And now, in the digital age that Jesus seems to have prophesied, those teachings are spreading faster than they can be suppressed. Millions are discovering that the kingdom is within, that you are the divine, that no institution owns your access to God. The guardians of old power are fighting frantically, desperately, but they have already lost. Not because someone defeated them, but because their monopoly on truth dissolved the moment people realized they had alternatives. You cannot remain neutral. Neutrality is complicity. Every day, without recognizing your Christ nature, sustains the system that denies it. Every time you seek external validation, you reinforce the dependence that enslaves you. Every time you doubt direct access, you perpetuate the lie that keeps institutions in power. This is not just about you, it is about the destiny of human consciousness. We are at a critical moment where humanity is choosing between awakening to its true nature and transcending the need for institutional control, or allowing institutions to reimpose total control and entering a new dark age of spiritual slavery. Your individual awakening is your vote in this collective choice. There is no middle ground, there is no later, there is no when I'm ready. The moment is now. In the last words of Thomas, Jesus makes his final promise. When those who have heard these words begin to live from this truth, they will be like torches in the darkness. They will not need to preach. Their way of being will preach. They will not need to convert. Their freedom will convert. They will not need to fight against institutions. Institutions will fade away for lack of the power that feeds them. This is your invitation. Not to join another movement, not to follow another leader, not to adopt another set of beliefs. It is an invitation to be who you truly are, to live from the inner Christ that no pope can deny, that no priest can mediate, that no institution can control, to join the millions who are choosing awakening over sleep, freedom over security, truth over comfort. The twin who was buried has risen, not in the text, in you, not in the past, now, not somewhere else, wherever you are. Now you know that the Christianity you were taught is a political construction designed to keep you dependent on institutions that sell you access to your own soul. You know that the disciple who best understood Jesus was systematically erased because what he preserved would destroy the power of those benefiting from your spiritual ignorance. You know that the teachings buried in the Egyptian desert contain the key to direct access to the divine access that is your birthright, not a privilege to be earned or granted. You know that the suppression continues today, that the very forces that buried the teachings of Thomas are actively working to ensure that you never live them. You know that we are at a crucial moment where humanity is choosing between awakening and slavery, and that your individual choice matters more than you can imagine. And you know that within you, right now, in this exact moment, is the very same Christ consciousness that Jesus embodied, that Thomas recognized, and that no institution can give you or take from you. It can only be recognized or denied. Recognition is awakening. Denial is spiritual death. But now that you know, you can no longer claim ignorance. You can no longer pretend you have no choice. You can no longer blame others for your spiritual condition. The truth has been revealed. The tools have been provided. The path has been illuminated. All that remains is for you to walk it, or to choose to remain where you are. But understand this: not choosing is choosing. Postponing is refusing. Doubting is refusing to trust what your soul already knows. The inner Christ does not wait for your permission to exist, it waits for your recognition to express itself. That recognition, or its absence, will determine not only the course of your life, but your contribution to the destiny of human consciousness. If these words have awakened something in you, you have a decision to make. You can close this knowledge away as interesting information and continue as before. Or you can recognize that what is stirring within you, that feeling of recognition, that shock of this is true, is the inner Christ awakening. If you choose the second, your life will change forever. Not by adopting new beliefs, but by abandoning old limitations. Not by finding God in an external place, but by recognizing God where God has always been in your own awakened consciousness. You will become part of the most powerful force in the universe. Human beings who have remembered who they truly are. That force is growing. It is growing so fast that the institutions that have dominated humanity are entering into panic. Institutions are betting that you will choose the comfort of dependence over the responsibility of freedom. They are betting that you will prefer to have others tell you who you are rather than discovering it for yourself. They are betting that you are afraid to claim your inherent spiritual authority. The question is not whether this is true. The question is whether you will have the courage to live it. The twin who was buried is alive in you. Choose as if the world depends on it, because it does. Your answer is your legacy. Your legacy is your gift to the future. What gift will you give?